In this video, I will use the Dracky from Dragon Quest Monsters as a Pokémon in Fire Red. The Dracky is one of the first monsters you encounter in Terry's Wonderland and its 3DS remake, and being an early game critter, its stats leave a lot to be desired, especially in the remake. For its stats as a Pokémon, I used an average of his original stats and 3DS stats, weighted slightly more in favor of the original. It will have 71 base HP, 58 attack, 63 defense, 81 special attack, 64 special defense, and 107 speed, for a total of 444. This is pretty awful even by Gen 3 standards, but its good skill set might be its saving grace. Since the DQM games use lookup tables instead of a formula to calculate stat growth, the rate of which can vary greatly at different levels, the conversion won't be exactly faithful. Table 11 not as good as its total number suggests because it's a late bloomer, like a worse version of 25. Its level-up moves are based on its default Dark Knight or Black Fighter skill set in TW3D, plus a few other moves for flavor and coverage. This is basically the physical ZAM set, but unfortunately, it doesn't get the AoE/Grand Nebula. Since the Dracky has much higher wisdom than attack anyway, I gave it Kazamel instead, although it was kind of redundant. The ZAM element could be either the Ghost or Dark type in Pokémon, but its animations in TW3D look more like the move Shadow Ball, and its physical skills are called Shade Slash and Shadow Slash, so I think Ghost makes more sense. I gave it a few Dark type moves as well, just for stab and the ability to hit all those normal types. I will set up a Dracky with perfect IVs and pre-applied EVs. It will have a neutral nature, because I can edit the base stats directly to make adjustments if necessary. It's in the Bird family in the original DQM, and the Demon family in the remake, so Dark and Flying types are a given. It doesn't get any useful traits other than Small Body, which trades 20% of max stats for turn priority, and it's the reason why its 3DS stats are so bad. However, as you might have seen in my Harmer run, priority is extremely overpowered in Pokémon, so I just gave it a 20% boost to Ghost and Dark damage, to make up for its poor stats. EV-wise, I maxed out its special attack and split the rest between both defenses. Its base HP is higher than defenses, so putting points in defenses is more effective than dumping them all into HP. It might be counterintuitive, but that's just how Pokémon mechanics work. It levels up very quickly in the original DQM games, so I put it in the 800,000 experience group. There's another group that only takes 600,000 EXP to reach level 100, but it's actually the slowest in the early levels, and I don't want to end up in the high 80s again. The early game trainers and wild Pokémon in Gen 1 give abysmal experience, so I was only level 13 after beating the optional rival and all those bug catchers in Viridian Forest. Fortunately, I have a special move for Brock, and being the first gym leader, his AI isn't very aggressive, and besides, Rock Tomb is just an awful move. Although the ROM patch I'm using has updated most moves to their Gen 5 stats, Rock Tomb wasn't buffed to 60 power and 95% accuracy until Gen 6. The Dark Knight skill set contains Weakening Wallop, which is a normal attack with a 50% chance to lower the target's attack stat, or basically a worse version of the move Lunge from Gen 6 or 7. The second rival battle isn't hard, with the only potential issue being Sand Attack from his Pidgeotto. I had nothing that could one-shot it, but it chose to attack, so I didn't have to worry about missing moves due to accuracy drops. By the way, I gave the rival Squirtle, but it doesn't really matter, since he always ends up with all 3 starter types on his team. His Bulbasaur team gets 2 Intimidators, but I won't be using physical moves later on anyway. This group takes 20% less EXP at all levels, which makes me level up quickly. Misty Starmie is actually quite overpowered this early on, and it can confuse with Water Pulse, but the game gives you a Persim Berry for it just before Mount Moon, albeit a bit hidden in an alcove. I wasn't able to one-shot her Starmie despite my level, but it couldn't do much to me either, and I equipped the Persim Berry for any confusion. The rival battle on the ship is just a joke, and his team only gained 2 levels on average. All of his Pokémon did evolve once, but middle-stage Pokémon aren't much better than their basic forms in these games, and Raticate is just trash. His Wartortle actually survived a hit from Zamel, but there was nothing it could do. Surge got nerfed hard from the original games, where his Raichu had Thunderbolt, but here it only has Shockwave, which is only good for PvP in some edge cases, and even so, Pokémon with Sand Veil are usually immune to Electric. I couldn't even one-shot his Raichu at level 37, but at least I was faster and had a Cherry Berry to cure the paralysis from Thunder Wave. Still, this isn't looking good for the late game, especially since I have 0 boosting moves. Shadow Slash is the tier 2 physical ZAM skill, and it does both ZAM and Donk damage. I gave it 70 base power like other slash moves in Pokémon, and a 30% chance to lower accuracy since I don't know what else to associate with the ghost type. I'll just replace it with night slash soon anyway. You will naturally be overleveled for the rival battle in the tower, thanks to the number of unskippable trainers on the way. If he had a different starter, he'd have a Gyarados here, but it won't be the overpowered version with Dragon Rage and Hydro Pump in the remakes. Those were actually its starting moves in the original games, because it wasn't encounterable in the wild. Erica has never been much of a challenge in solo runs, since all of her Pokémon are quite slow and fragile. I was still using Gust as my flying stab, but even that was enough to one-shot everything on her team, even the Vileplume which I thought had pretty decent HP and special defense. The Giga Drain TM she gives will be my only special coverage move, as well as my only form of recovery outside of rest. Fortunately, it got buffed to 75 power and 10 PP in Gen 5, making it much more usable. Koga's gym presents the biggest level bump in the game, but those bikers on the cycling road and trainers in his gym have a lot of evolved Pokémon that give a lot of experience. My leveling pace was also starting to pick up now, as the difference between EXP groups is more apparent the higher the level. Air Slash is actually a Gen 4 move, although Air Cutter is from Gen 3. Compared to other slashes, it trades 5% accuracy for 5 more power, but as all other moves that don't have perfect accuracy, it feels like it misses far more often than it should. Despite my level advantage and stab, I couldn't one-shot either of Koga's evolved Pokémon, and I don't think gym leaders have any EVs in these remakes, or even perfect IVs for that matter. Again, this isn't looking good for the Pokémon League, where I'm quite certain the enemies all have perfect IVs and at least some EVs. The rivals team at Sylph Company are at lower levels than Koga's, because you can do the Rocket Quest before his gym. I always do the gym first, since the bikers and other trainers in the gym give a lot more experience than those rocket grunts. The biggest threat on the rivals team in solo runs is usually Sand Attack on his Pidgeot, but this time, I was over 20 levels higher with decent special attack, and I'm sure the crit didn't matter. Everything else on his team was no threat, and although his Blastoise survived a Giga Drain, all it had at this point was Water Gun, due to its horrible level up moves in this gen. They should give it Water Pulse or Surf before it gets Hydro Pump. The following Giovanni battle was pretty much a clean sweep. Both his Kangaskhan and Nidoqueen still have Tail Whip, and I guess they just couldn't be bothered to give them a custom moveset. Some people complain that these old games are harder. Well, they're not. The newer games just handhold you too much, which gives the impression of easiness. Sabrina literally can't hit dark types, since you can't get one before the post-game, not even Umbreon due to the lack of in-game clock, and friendship evolutions aren't enabled until you receive the national dex. Moves like Aura Sphere and Focus Blast didn't exist until Gen 4 either. I thought about making the Calm Mind TM compatible, but decided against it because it makes no sense on a little vampire bet that looks anything but calm. Besides, dark types are already incredibly overpowered in what's essentially a Gen 1 game, since the fighting types are terrible, and Magneton isn't used by anyone relevant. Dark Pulse is just the special replacement for Crunch after the physical special split, and honestly, it'd be the only move you ever need to beat all Gen 1 and 2 games, had it existed then. I should have realized how overpowered a special dark move would be in this game, and given the Dracky Snarl or Crunch instead. Anyway, Dark Pulse just one-shot everything on Blaine's team. It could have been a high damage roll on his Arcanine, but again, gym leaders might not have perfect IVs or any EVs in these remakes. It was the same story with Giovanni's gym, and I had Giga Drain too. He had a Rhydon in the original games and Yellow, but they nerfed him in the remake by replacing it with a second Rhyhorn. I have no idea why. Probably because the rival gets a Rhydon as well in the final battle. It's a pointless change either way, just like its evolution in Gen 4, considering Rhyperior only got a measly 10 points in each stat, except for speed which it needed the most. And Solid Rock wasn't going to help it survive against its two double weaknesses, water and grass, both are heavily special oriented as well. The last rival battle before the league was also devoid of any challenge, thanks to his total lack of resistance against dark. I gave the Dracky Kazamel mostly as a filler, since it doesn't naturally get anything stronger than Tier 2 from its default skill set, and it doesn't get the physical Grand Nebula either. They locked most AoE physical skills behind hindering traits like Foot Dragger and Disenchanted in Terry's Wonderland 3D, presumably because they have the potential to one-shot an entire team. I guess too many players complained, since the same thing didn't happen in any of the later games, not even in the mobile port of TW3D. Here are my stats and moves for the Pokémon League. My stats are pretty mediocre for level 74, but I do get a 10% boost from badges, and level is a part of the damage formula too. Moves-wise, Kazamil is totally redundant because Stab Dark Pulse is stronger, albeit slightly, and has a 20% chance to stun. Air Slash hits Bruno's fighting types that resist Dark, and Giga Drain provides some additional coverage and recovery. I equipped an Aspear Berry for Lorelei, since the worst thing that could happen was me getting frozen. My ice weakness shouldn't be much of a problem, as none of her Pokémon have particularly high special attack, and I can heal a portion of the damage with Giga Drain. Her leading Dugong doesn't like to attack, and it looks like it has defensive EVs, since my Giga Drain couldn't one-shot it even at 22 levels higher. But again, my special attack isn't very high, and I don't get stab on it. Speaking of her Dugong, you could actually soft-lock yourself in the original games by using a poison or fighting Pokémon and picking the move Rage against it. Gen 1 Rage locks you into the move for the rest of the battle, and due to a programming oversight, the AI would only use Rest, which is Psychic type, and enemies had no PP. Getting confused by her Lapras could have been bad, but I didn't get too unlucky with the coin flips, and her Cloyster just spammed Protect instead of attacking. Bruno was obviously a free win. I don't even know why he has 2 Onix, which is probably the worst final form Pokémon in Gen 1, and isn't even a fighting type. They seem to have forgotten the existence of Primeape and Poliwrath, you know, the other 2 fighting types in Gen 1, and they only remembered them in Gen 2. Agatha was a free win as well, because Ghost is inexplicably weak to Dark, and this is one of the weird type interactions that I can never understand. In the early Gen 2 beta, Dark and Normal were actually weak to each other, which would have made much more sense. But I suppose they changed it for balance reasons, seeing as there are simply far too many Normal-type Pokémon and moves, and being weak to Normal would be a death sentence. Lance could have been a problem, if not for the horrendous moveset on his leading Gyarados. I missed an Air Slash, but the best move he could use against me was the fixed 40 damage Dragon Rage. It would be the perfect setup fodder if I had any boosting moves, but unfortunately, I didn't. They should have given it at least one of Thunder Wave and Dragon Dance to deter setups, or maybe they did in the rematch, but it takes forever to unlock, requiring you to complete the entire post-game. I'm quite certain from my previous runs that his Aerodactyl has EVs in either HP or special defense, because it took less special damage than the Gyarados, despite its lower base special defense. It might just be damage rolls, but the difference was significant enough for me to believe otherwise. His Dragonite basically threw the fight by not even attacking. Outrage is now physical with 120 base power, so a crit would have easily one-shot me. The biggest threat in the champion battle is again, Sand Attack on his leading Pidgeot, since I really can't afford any accuracy loss. My Dark Pulse narrowly missed out on a one-shot, and it didn't stun, but his Pidgeot just chose to do chip damage with Aerial Ace. I think the reason is because Sand Attack is ground type, and although it can hit flying types, the AI still thinks I'm immune. I don't know why he switched his Pidgeot for Rhydon when I'm a flying type, maybe because I used Air Slash last turn. The crit from Dark Pulse certainly didn't matter, since it would have been a free KO with Giga Drain anyway. I had nothing that could one-shot his Arcanine, but it's just one of those Pokémon that looks more intimidating than it really is, due to its inflated base stats, much like Kingdra. They were good in Gen 2 because of Stat EXP, which allowed you to max out all 6 stats, but those all-rounders just don't work in Gen 3 and beyond. By the way, a critical Hydro Pump from his Blastoise could have downed me, but luckily, it didn't roll a crit. So, in conclusion, this run turned out to be much easier than I expected from an early game monster with subpar stats, and it was all thanks to it being a specially oriented Dark type. Dark is practically unresisted by Gen 1 Pokémon, and paired with Flying, not even the few fighting types could stand a chance. I expect the Dracky to have a much harder time in Emerald, due to the abundance of Dark and Steel types, and it clearly has zero chance of beating Steven. Thanks for watching.